Okay, so you did your sky and your water, and now we're ready to start working a little bit on the land, okay? Um, so usually near a body of water is some sort of rock formation or sand of some sort, okay? And sometimes it's a little, sometimes it's a lot. So I'm gonna mix up kind of a rocky sandish color. So I'm gonna use some yellow, some red, teeny bit of blue, and some white. A little more red in there. Okay. So I have kind of this like, meh. I mean, in sand and rock formation, they come in all different, so you can't really do this incorrectly. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in right next to my water line, and I'm going to smear in some shore. Now, a river might have, it doesn't necessarily have a ton. It's not like a beach. So I'm just kind of coming in the sides there. I'm just kind of creating this definition before I start with the grass. You wouldn't necessarily need to do it a bunch back here. Just kind of a little bit. I don't particularly love this color I made up. If I were to do this again, I would probably make this color a little more, it's a little too orangey for me, but for the demo, it's fine. Okay. So I'm just, okay. Now I'm gonna come in with some grass. And at first I'm just gonna do the grass very, just a basic texture. And then I can always go back in later once my painting is dried and, or once the main parts of the painting have dried. So notice I'm gonna go in with the grass in a vertical motion instead of horizontal, all right? And that's because typically, grass grows vertical. So I'm just kind of scrubbing this in. This is going to take a couple layers, but let's just do one layer and then we'll work on the trees. And your grass doesn't have to, grass doesn't have to be perfectly green. We know that. Okay. So I'm kind of coming back here. Your horizon line doesn't have to be perfectly straight. The world is not flat, so don't worry if your horizon line is a little bumpy. Remember, things are probably a little darker towards the back than they are towards the front. Sorry, I'm running out of blue right here. Notice I'm using a wider brush, a thicker brush. I'm not using a real thin brush right now, just because I'm trying to get cover as much ground as possible and not create too much detail. So I'm coming up here. Just kind of quickly. I know that it's not doing much for my shoreline. You're probably like, "Ms. Hawkins, you're covering your shoreline." I know, we can fix that later. Those come in with the details. Right now I'm just kind of getting an underpainting in. You can see this is why you have to tape down. If you notice, my paper is starting to warp a little bit. Okay, so I have a general feel of some grass on my paper, okay? Now, I'm going to show you how to do some trees. So I'm going to mix up some brown and red, yellow, and blue, remember. And you might even want to put a little black just to, because remember the black acrylic we have is a little on the cool side. So it might add an interesting depth to your brown if you add a little black to it. Just a little bit though, don't overdo it. Okay. So on this side, I'm going to show you how to do evergreens. And on this side, I'm going to show you how to do more of a typical Midwestern tree, like a maple or an oak tree, okay? All right, so for the evergreen tree, I'm going to start with the base. And my painting is still a little wet, so it's not going to be as nice as yours because I'm doing this fast. So the first thing I do is I put in the branch for that. I'm going to do two. So this one is more in the foreground. Notice the bottom of the trunk comes very near the bottom. And then I'm going to draw one also, or paint one also near the background. Okay, so I might actually do two. That might look good. Two right there. Okay. Notice these two, while they also cross into the horizon, they're much shorter. They start way up here towards the middle ground area or the background area. So those are going to be far away. Okay. All right. Now, for an evergreen or a pine tree, or they come by a multitude of names. I'm going to use one of these flat brushes. You need a flat brush. And I'm going to mix up some green. The key here is, though, you want your green to be a little bit different than the grass, because you want your tree to not look so similar to the grass. So the way I'm going to do that is I added a teeny bit of red to this green to kind of dull it, like we've talked about before, using a complementary color. Okay, now I'm going to use the side of my paintbrush. And evergreens grow out. So they go out, start at the branch, and go out, start at the branch. Now I'm going to have to do a couple layers to get this tree nice and solid in. I start at the branch, I move out, I load up again, start at the branch. Notice I'm not going like this, I'm going up and down. I'm actually going to make these a little more bluer because they're a little hard to see. I should make my grass lighter. Starting at the branch or the trunk and moving out. Starting at the trunk, moving out. Okay, now I'm going to go in with a little white just to add a little highlight. So I'm going same thing, up and down. Unfortunately, I should have really made my grass like yellow. It was a bad choice on my part. Okay. And then I'm gonna go back in with a little shadow for the under part. So I'm gonna go in with a little blue. I'm working very fast. Normally you would do a lot of this once your paint had a second to dry. I'm doing this fast so I can make the video for you. So if you feel like I'm just not getting that good layer of paint, I can't see anything, just let your painting dry a minute. No big deal. And move on to something else, okay? So I'm going to do the second side. Going from the trunk out, trunk out, trunk out. I'm not making nice smooth strokes. I'm going up, down, up, down, up, down. Okay. All right. I'm going to do the same with those two little ones back in the back. I'm going to go from the trunk out, trunk out. They're a little less defined, so I don't have to trunk out. Sorry, I'm trying to move my hand so the camera. And if I made a mistake, just, there we go. Trunk out, trunk out. Okay. Those are some pine trees. Let's go over here to a maple or a oak tree. They have a name, but I can't think of it right now. The kind of trees that lose their leaves. Okay. So I'm going to make this one kind of in the middle ground. So I'm going to land its trunk right about here. You can see it's still kind of transparent. That's just because it's going to need a couple layers to make this really dark, okay? All right. So the first thing is to start off with the trunk, and then you make the roots kind of flow into the grass a little. And then later we can go back over those roots with grass again to make it really blend in. Trees grow, they split, they split, they split. That's how they grow. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go out, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go out. So right now I'm using nice smooth brush strokes, okay? Unlike what I was just doing with the evergreen tree. For this, you don't need to draw every single little branch. If this were a tree that was closer to the foreground, we would, but we're making this one in the middle ground. So we're gonna see some branches. We've got a little bit of, we can see some differentiation in the branches, but for the most part, we're just kind of generally getting just the major ones in, okay? Okay. Same with what I added some highlights and lowlights to the evergreen. I'm going to do that to this tree as well. So I'm going to take a little yellow, a little white. I'm going to add a little highlight to my tree just to show there's some light hitting the side at some point. It's a little tricky to see. I realize that. In this, I gotta figure out how to get rid of the glare in this camera. I'm going to take a little dark. So I'm actually, just because it's what I have for here, I'm just using some blue. Okay, so you can mess around with the branch. Then here's how you do the leaves. So you can use the different types of brush. The one I have right here, I'm just using one of the smaller flats. You don't want to use one that's super flat like what we used for the evergreen. The round ones actually work the best, the ones that are kind of big and round. I just didn't happen to grab one. You can also use the one we were using for you can also use this one. This will work. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm actually, just for the sake of you being able to see what I'm doing, I'm going to make the leaves on this tree red. Okay, so we're going to pretend this is fall. Watch how I go in. I'm not going to paint side to side. I'm not going to go in a pattern. I'm going to go straight up and down. And sometimes it's thick, sometimes it's thin. Okay, now to create some visual interest in this, and typically leaves have multiple colors in them, I'm going in with some yellow right now. Some of it stays thick, some of it I'm like, okay, I need to thin that out a little bit. Sometimes I press a little harder, whoops, sorry, hit the camera. Sometimes I press a little softer. And I'm covering those branches with leaves. I'm going to go in with a little more yellow. Okay? All right. This is your tutorial on practicing various landscape techniques, okay? Practice them. I'll help you as I see you working on them. But remember, this is only practice. So don't get too worried if your first go at this doesn't work out. That's why we're practicing before we start the actual landscape painting. Okay? All right.